Diane, how did you find carnivore?
Well, I first heard it about maybe 4 or 5 years ago from Justin Rhodes. He's a rancher, a farmer, and um, homesteader. So he had Lyme disease and some autoimmune issues. And I know that he mentioned that he was using a carnivore diet. And I said, no way, that can't be healthy. No vegetables. Anyway, so it did help him considerably, and I watched his progress over time. And then I started looking it up a few years later because I was absolutely desperate. And that's when I think Carrie Mann was just getting started at that time, and he came up with the idea for the carnivore movie or carnivore documentary, and I ran into a bunch of wonderful people, including yourself. And I just decided, hey, I'm just going to go for it and see what happens. So I started, it was 1 year, August 1st, um, this last year. So now I'm at 15 months in, and I'll never go back. Never. I just feel great compared to what I did. And now I feel like I've got my whole future in front of me instead of, oh, it's a gradual downhill and now I'm going to go into a nursing home. Oh boy, that sounds like fun. No, it really didn't, especially when I've been working in healthcare and I had firsthand experience with taking care of people who suffered from Alzheimer's and dementia and just chronic degenerative diseases. And I just said to myself, I don't want this for my future. And so that's why I really changed. I recognized I was a sugar addict. And really, I had I really didn't have a clear understanding how bread and noodles and any type of flour was so close to sugar in the first place. They're just long chains of sugar molecules, and that they could be addictive too. And that over the last 10 years, I've really worked very hard to get rid of most, raw plain sugar in my diet, and but it wasn't enough, and I really had to get rid of most of the sugar substitutes and get rid of carbs. And once I got onto a carnivore diet, wow, things really started changing for me.
So, what are some of those changes you've experienced in the last 15 months?
Well, um, first of all, I weighed, I believe, about 165. Now, at one point, I was up to 199, but over the last 10 years, getting rid of sugar and just eating healthier, trying to go more towards whole foods and trying to stay away from processed foods, um, I had lost. Oh, and I did experience some weight loss with fasting as well. Uh, so I'd gone from 199 to about 155, but I put that back on, especially in the wintertime, another 10 pounds. So when I started, I was about 165. And so I had a tremendous weight loss and really loss of fat, uh, gaining muscle. I'm just like, what? I, I've got some guns going on here. I don't know. Here we go. I mean, I've got muscles here. I have muscles most of my life. What is with this? I love it. And I'm a hiker and I walk a lot. So, I've got muscles in my thighs and calves, and I'm like, dang, I'm looking good. I am down to 128. And that's just the ice. Really, that's the cherry on top of the ice cream, okay? Um, because boy, oh boy, I had a slew of autoimmune illnesses. and hypertension. I was just chronically inflamed. I had arthritis and um, Sjogren's syndrome. My hypertension was so bad. I not only took niacin, but three other prescription medications. Um, Sjogren's syndrome, connective tissue disease, um, losing my eyesight. I've got Fuchs dystrophy and epithelial membrane uh, dystrophy, macular degeneration. Um, my vitreous layer in the back of my eyes had detached. And my eye doctor said, that's related to type 2 diabetes. That's the result of having blood sugars that are too high. So I found a physician. Once I sell my home or have it rented, I'm going to stay with some friends up near the Tulsa area in Oklahoma. And I did find a osteopathic physician up there that uses the ketogenic diet. So at least we'll be sort of somewhere on the same level playing field. Anyway, I'm just doing so much better. I used to take 2 handfuls of prescription medication. I don't take any of those. I take one Zyrtec now. Um, Actually, I did start recently on gabapentin, which helps with nerve damage. I have degenerative disc disease in my back, and I've had some problems with pinched nerves in my lower back, which I've kind of refused surgery on. So my issue is I do just fine when I'm just walking without any weight on my back. But to go backpacking, you've got to carry about 30 pounds on your back in your backpack because you carry your tent and everything to go out for days and your food and your water. So sometimes that will get to causing me pain. And so I am taking gabapentin for that. Um, those are the only 2 prescription medications. Um, Now, I did watch uh, an interview between Michaela Peterson and Dave Asprey, and they were talking about mast cell activation syndrome. That really hit home with me because he said, if you've been diagnosed with fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue syndrome and long COVID, which I've been diagnosed with all 3, um, you've probably got mast cell activation syndrome. And it's kind of complex, but it explains to me why if I stray off my diet, any at all, I know some people can have broccoli or cauliflower or something that's low in carbs. But for me, it's an issue because my allergies become active, more active, and I'll become inflamed, and my belly will be a little inflamed, and I'm just miserable. So I think it really does explain for Michaela why she still struggles. Um, Dave listed off a lot of interventions that you can use to help get those mast cells uh, quieted down, and you have to keep them quiet for 6 months. And it takes about 6 months for your body to replace them. And if at the end of 6 months you can keep from becoming inflamed and those mast cells becoming inflamed, then you can possibly start to reintroduce some other foods. And so that's kind of what he says that, you have to find out what works for you. And if by any means, if anyone's had any of those 3 things, 2 or 3 of those things, look up that interview between the 2 of them. It was just absolutely fascinating. And I actually found the longer version of the interview and I went through it and I wrote down all the things. And so I'm gradually adding some of these interventions in. And I just ordered some things from Amazon. So I'm going to be trying them. But hopefully, eventually, I would like to, um, just because I think that if you have some organic broccoli and it's just steamed with butter on it. Well, and I love butter. I love dairy, and I can't have that. I'm very allergic to it. I can't have eggs. Okay, very allergic to that too. So a lot of things that other carnivores can have, I can't have, and I'm just going to have to stick with that for at least the next 6 months and try and get this calmed down. But I was really over the last 15 months looking like, okay, I feel great, but why is it sometimes I'm still having inflammation? Why is it sometimes I still have brain fog? Why is it sometimes I have low energy? And now I'm beginning to understand. And I think that another person I've learned a lot from has been Dr. Boz. I did have a continuous glucose monitor for a while, and I've used the Keto Mojo as well. But at this moment, I really, you can use it's $250 a month for that continuous glucose monitor. And I really have wanted to explore some of these other modalities of healing. And so I decided to just discontinue using those because the cost is, you know, quite a bit. And I could invest that money in some supplements instead. So I'm doing that. And I can just say that, most of the time I have no pain. I feel great. I do have a little bit of issues with insomnia, but I think that goes with um, the type 2 underlying type 2 diabetes, where you're just kind of borderline, where it's like 2 to, I don't know, 3 in the morning, you wake up because your body is wanting some more glucose. And I'm learning, hey, just get up and have a hit of some MCT oil. um, but I've also just gone ahead, and because I know a lot of doctors are saying it's perfectly okay to have more than 10 milligrams of melatonin, so go ahead and have another melatonin. And last night I even resorted to having a second valerian root. So I use these supplements to help um, enhance my path to healing. Eventually, I'm hoping that I won't need them, but I understand that because I spent so many years from the time I was born. My mother wasn't able to breastfeed me. I was coming transverse. In other words, in 1961, when I was born, um, they didn't do C-sections commonly. They had been done, but in some very big centers, and most physicians had no clue how to do them. And if a baby's trying to come sideways, well, they won't fit. So my doctor actually tried to turn me um, externally, and that didn't work. So he actually flipped me internally, reached inside my mother, and turned me around facing the right direction. So I did survive, and my mother survived. But back then, they thought that my mother, of course, developed an infection, a raging infection, because, the doctor's hands, even though they're surgically sterile, have to go through a non-sterile environment to reach up into the sterile area. And my mother had a horrible infection for about 10 days. She wasn't allowed to see me at all. They separated moms and babies back then because they were afraid I would get sick and die. So I was bottle fed from day one. And back then, you can bet it it wasn't a healthy diet or a good start for a new baby to start with. And then my mom really did not like to cook. And boy, we had TV dinners come out. Grocery stores became a thing. Before that, she would go to each individual market. You'd go to the bread bakery for any baked goods. You'd go to the milkman would deliver any dairy products to your doorstep. you'd go to the meat market. So you'd go to the vegetable market. So you'd go to each place separately until I was probably maybe in first grade when, and boy, when those TV dinners came out, I was probably about 10 or 12 by then. Boy, my mother, she was just so happy. And all those boxed and packaged goods, that was primarily how she prepared meals for us. And I grew up that way. And this is the way I fed my kids. I have four children that are adults now. And I didn't know any better because that was the way I grew up. But my mother had a lot of the same health issues that I had. And she did wind up dying at 72 from um, non Hodgkin's lymphoma. Surprisingly enough, it went to her brain. And that's not supposed to happen. Anyway, um, so I just didn't want to go down that path. And that was when I recognized that I needed to get rid of sugar because I understood the concept of a PET scan. My mother um, was told that for 3 days, now they don't do them this way today, I guess they're much more sensitive, but my mother for 3 days ate a ketogenic diet. She was told only protein and only fat. That's all she was allowed for 3 days. And then they would give her an IV containing radioactively tagged glucose. And cancer cells are sugar hogs, and they would absorb that sugar much faster than any other part of the body. And when they would do tomography type of X-ray, they the cells that had taken up the radioactively dyed sugar would just light up like Christmas tree bulbs. And I thought, wow, this only makes sense to me. I'm like, this was like in 2010. If you get rid of sugar out of your diet, you're not going to have cancer. It just made sense. And so that's what I lost my mom in 2011. And that's why I said, hey, sugar has got to go for me. But of course, you know, we're told that we just shouldn't consume that many sugar calories, that we should mostly eat carbs and a little bit of protein, the size of a deck of cards. Well, where was the research behind that? Oh my goodness. So I just thank God, that I put things together and that, I ran across Justin Rhodes and how much it helped him. And then I started looking into the carnivore diet. Well, I started out ketogenic. I think I did that for about 6 weeks before deciding to go carnivore. And I believe it was because I also had an experience with a friend whose son was type 1 diabetic. Now, they decided early on to use the ketogenic diet to help control his diabetes. And he was actually able to swim competitively in high school, which is no mean feat, no minor feat, let me tell you. And he had very stable blood glucoses. Um, and that was where I first heard about the continuous glucose monitor. And I started out with the ketogenic diet um, from her experience. And she was saying, a really serious ketogenic diet's less than 10 carbs a day. I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I could do that. So I started out aiming for 20. And then once I got to 20 and I could stay there for a while, then I went to 10. And then I started learning about carnivore and, you know, you can do zero carbs. And I realized, wow, I felt better. I was losing weight, gaining muscle. Um, now I have struggled. carb cravings and occasionally falling off the wagon. Working in working with the elderly in nursing homes. Well, after COVID, food is free basically. They're like so happy to have somebody come and work with people in someone to work with the elderly in nursing homes, that they give you all kinds of incentives, and um, you don't have to pay for food, as long as there's plenty left over after the residents have eaten. We're allowed to help ourselves, and that included desserts. Well, it's really hard. At one point, I was taking care of a friend that I really adored, and she um, had some severe dementia, uh, and it was clear we were going to lose her. And I'd cared for her off and on for quite a few years. Anyway, so she was nearing the end of her life, and I had taken on the job of arranging a group, a team of nursing assistants to look after her 24/7. She was an invalid at that time. She couldn't really move her arms or legs and do anything to care for herself. And um, at first, it went along fairly well. Then the nursing home supervisor said, "Well, you can't use any of our employees to work as sitters for your patient because it's a conflict of interest." I was like, "Really?" So, I mean, they didn't even give me 2 weeks notice. It was just like, "You're on your own, lady." So I wound up with COVID a third time because I worked 72 hours, I think, the week before um, I came down with COVID. And that's just way too long for anyone, even if you're on a carnivore diet. But the problem is, most people understand with carnivore diet, you've got to um, really pretty much prepare your food at home and bring it with you. Um, there's just no way um, you can really eat a carnivore diet eating nursing home food because, like, for example, my most recent job, I asked if they would make hamburger for you, but it would be one or two, and it had to have the bun and all the fixings, you know. Um, and they just refused. They wouldn't, just cook me 4 hamburger patties. No way. So, if you're working 72 hours a week, it's pretty hard to make your food and bring it with you because you're hardly getting any sleep when you're at home anyway. So, I did wind up eating some of the junky nursing home food, and that plus working 72 hours. No wonder why I got COVID the third time. So, yeah, I was off the wagon, but my friend was dying, and there's this emotional upheaval that goes with that too. Um, it wasn't too hard for me to get back on the wagon, mostly because you're like, man, now you're sick. You want to live, get going. So, that third bout of COVID was really rough because I had been able to hike 5 or 6 miles easy in a day, and was looking forward and planning on hiking the Appalachian Trail. Well, I wound up with pericardial effusion. That's where you have fluid around your heart. Basically, I had a small tear in my heart muscle wall. And so I wound up with extra fluid around my heart and that pressure. And then my lower lungs weren't expanding properly either. It was either from scarring or atelectasis, just where your airways aren't opening properly anymore. So I just recognized that, I really had no other choice. If I wanted to, it was basically choose life or, start going the nursing home route. And, it was simple for me. It was like, I've done it before. I can do it again. Just get off the carb wagon, get back onto strictly meat. And, there you go. Yes, it has been, it's particularly hard to socialize with other people. None of my friends are
Mm.
carnivore, none at all. And so when they get together and they want to go out, they really would like to see, it doesn't just upset them, upsets the waiter or waitress, that you don't want the broccoli, that you don't want baked potatoes, you just want the steak. So, anyway, and then when you're preparing food, like if I was staying with my friends and I prepare food, well, they would want vegetables. And it's really hard if you're making fajitas to just not have some onions and peppers or salt too.
How are you actually eating day to day? Because you mentioned you've got a problem with eggs. Is it just steak, and how many times?
Basically, I primarily eat steak and hamburger, beef bacon, because I don't handle pork. Um, Beef bacon. I do eat sardines and I don't like them. But I do like they make me feel good, but there's not enough fat content is the problem. I can't just add olive oil or avocado oil to my sardines. It's disgusting. I do have them with a bit of mustard or avocado mayonnaise and mustard. That's not too bad. It's a little bit more palatable. Um, I can't have any dairy. So if I want to have a little bit of yogurt, they do make a coconut yogurt. That's pretty good. Uh, Sugar free. But primarily it's hamburger and steak. Sardines. I do have a salmon fillet defrosting, so I'll have salmon on occasion. But that's primarily my diet.
And
I
how often are you eating?
um, I can eat. It depends. If I hike 17 miles in a day, uh, I've got to eat a lot more, or possibly 3 times a day. And typically, I eat twice a day. Although, if I'm not as active, like today, I just ate one meal, and I didn't eat as much. I had a couple of hamburgers, a couple of bacon, beef bacon slices, and I had some yogurt, and I had all that same meal, um, and that's it. Basically, I want to include the yogurt because I know that my gut health needs some good bacteria in it, uh, and that's what I'm seeking. I did recently. Oh, another thing I forgot to mention. I also did some heavy metal testing and um, discovered that I have lead toxicity and mercury toxicity both. So that's why, even though I like tuna, I don't have any. And I'm having the amalgams in my teeth removed. So, it over time, and I am taking some, I just recently got some new supplements, spirulina and chlorella. And I just put them in capsules myself. I'm not going to drink that stuff. It's disgusting. And but it's supposed to help detoxify your body. You can also, by sweating a lot, um, that will help to remove heavy metals. I take selenium, that helps. I supplement with iodine. So there are a lot of supplements that I also use, but I recognize that my gut doesn't function as it will in the future. I don't have, it's not just the numbers, but it's also the variety of different bacteria that you will develop over time that makes a healthy gut biome. And a lot of people don't understand that it's actually the bacteria in your gut that makes the serotonin that your brain uses. So, I've learned a lot over the last couple of years, just really digging into the science. And I think, ultimately I'm going to come out a winner um, for all of this. And I hope to share it with other people because I learned it. I'm following a lot of scientific geeky type of people, and if I can help get the word out by either sharing about the carnivore diet or sharing about some of the supplements that I use to help, overcome some of this um, deleterious type of um, problems with my body from the horrible diet that I had for 61 years of my life, really. Um, I that's my goal is I just would love to share that with other people that you don't just because you're getting older, you don't have to get old and decrepit and not be able to move and walk around anymore, that there is still good quality of life to be had.
That's
And
right.
yeah,
Yeah.
like
So ha have any of your friends, been at all interested?
I think a few of them have increased their protein intake, but that's, sugar is extremely addictive. And, one friend has a couple of times wanted to go more in that direction, but her husband really, um, he's got some serious, carb addiction going on too. So it in a marriage, I think it's harder for one individual uh, to go in a different direction, especially when carbs are uh, so difficult to turn away from, especially if they're right there in your face.
Yeah,
So
so yeah. Based on your experience, if someone said to you, "Look, Diane, I wanna get started with carnivore, what should I do?" What advice would you give them?
well, I think for me, and each person has to do what works best for them. But first of all, number one thing is getting rid of plain old sugar. And, it's not going to hurt to use some sugar substitutes to help wean yourself away from it, but gradually decreasing the amount so that over time your palate gets used to tasting flavors other than sweet and always just seeking that satiety that you get from having a sweet taste. Now fat tastes sweet to me, and that's preferable. I can have my coffee with just coconut cream in it and um, a little bit of coconut milk, and it tastes pretty fantastic. Um, but like, I know a lot of people are really down on the element stuff, but when I first started, I used that element, particularly the chocolate, in my coffee um, to help get away from using the sweet all the time. Um, Now I don't need it. It tastes fantastic. So number one is getting away from sugar. Number two, now you've got to decrease your carbs. Record everything. And a lot of people think, oh, this is too much trouble, too much time. I don't have. There are apps where you can just actually take a photograph of your meal and it will tell you the breakdown of the protein to fat to carbohydrates. And you want to get to the point where you're down to 30 or 40 grams of carbs in a day. And then you aim for 20 grams of carbs per day and you stay steady there for a month or two. And then you go for 10 grams of carbs in a day until you can get it to zero. And then you're doing good. Um, because there's just nothing uh, like the differences in the energy that you get from burning fat as compared to burning carbs. It's Burning carbs is such a dirty fuel and it makes you feel really tired. So I've learned it's really hard. I used to say to people all the time, you need to try a carbohydrate diet. Just quit, you know, having everything else, just eat meat. Well, that's just too extreme for most people. And I honestly, I didn't start out that way either. So recently, when people comment that they felt better having some gummy bears, I'm like, well, I don't think it's necessarily the sugar from the gummy bears, but there's a lot of protein in that gelatin. And I think that gelatin probably helps you feel better because your body's probably lacking enough protein. So I'm just starting to emphasize the good and trying to help think about steering them away from, you know, uh, that the fact that sugar is a dirty fuel and more of that fat is a clean burning fuel, and you're going to heal a lot better and feel a lot better if your body is producing ketones and your brain all of a sudden you can think clearly. It's like, oh, yes, hooray.
So, Diane, if people want to reach out to you, do you have any social media or any way of getting in contact?
Oh, yes, I do. On Facebook, I'm just Diane Augustine, the way my name is spelled. Um, and I'm located in Altus, Oklahoma, currently selling or renting out my house. And I'm on YouTube as Lioness Hiker. I do intend, I recently won the lottery, so to speak, with the Pacific Crest Trail Association. If you want a long distance permit, you have to participate in their lottery style application process. And I actually got a long distance hiking permit for this next coming spring for the Pacific Crest Trail. So that's 22,650 miles. And I plan on both blogging and vlogging about it. And I just truly hope that I can inspire other people to follow healthier lifestyles in that way. I'm also on X. I think it's Diane Augustine. Get rid of the E at the end with a number one.
Diane, I'll link to your socials below.
Okay.
Um, Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. I really appreciate your time.
Well, thank you, Dave. I appreciate you having me on. And I hope to pretty much follow in your footsteps. I want to interview other people that are starting out on this journey or have been doing it for a while, because the more that we share this information, the more it's going to grow exponentially